Even for species that do not spend time interpreting facial expressions in others, selective attention provides a number of advantages. Animals in their natural environment face the constant challenge of identifying food, potential mates, and threatening stimuli. The time and effort to search for these stimuli would be reduced if animals could focus on one item, e.g., a specific food, at a time. They may do this by forming a mental image of the target and then scanning the environment for stimuli that match this image. Tinbergen, 1960, was the first to put this hypothesis forward, suggesting that foraging animals form a search image, a mental representation of a target, which allows them to selectively attend to specific features in the environment. The idea came from his observation that birds did not eat certain types of insects when they first appeared in the spring, probably because they were difficult to detect on a cryptic background. As the birds had more experience with seeing these insects, however, they were able to locate and quickly gobble up the prey. Petrowick and Camille, 1981, tested Tinbergen's idea that birds were forming search images by training blue jays, Cyanocita cristata, to peck a screen when they saw a moth. See Figure 2.19. The slide on the screen changed with each trial, and all slides contained one image of a moth on either a cryptic or a conspicuous background. The key point in the experiment is that there were two types of moths, distinguished in terms of the color and pattern on their wings. Birds were better at detecting one type of moth if it appeared in successive trials, suggesting that they were forming search images of the more plentiful prey. The results also fit with field research, showing that common food items are foraged at higher rates in the natural environment. The explanation for both findings is that search images develop with experience, and selective attention allows animals to focus on stimuli that match these images. In that respect, both search images and selective attention are cognitive processes that provide an evolutionary advantage. They improve foraging and may aid searches for other biologically relevant stimuli. Figure 2.19. A blue jay waits for an image of a moth to appear on one of the screens. Okay, so the blue jay's on a perch and he's looking at a screen that has like two panels and to see when a moth appears. Interestingly, a search image is maintained as a mental representation only when the target is difficult to find, i.e., it is cryptic. When food items are conspicuous and easy to locate, search images do not emerge or quickly disappear. This suggests that the cognitive resources required for developing and maintaining a search image are recruited only if they are necessary. This makes sense in that search images make scanning more efficient, but may cause organisms to miss something unexpected in their environment if they are focusing only on stimuli that match their search image. Sustained attention. Selective attention allows animals to focus on a small set of stimuli, but this is not enough to function effectively in the environment. Many situations require organisms to maintain a focus on one aspect of their surroundings for extended periods of time. This process is called sustained attention and is measured in both humans and animals using vigilance tasks. Rather than identifying a target, as in search tasks, subjects are required to monitor a particular location and to indicate when a target stimulus is presented. In humans, this can be done on a computer screen with flashing lights. Subjects are instructed to press a key as quickly as possible after a light appears somewhere on the screen. The light flashes are brief and the time between them is unpredictable, so subjects must be vigilant in monitoring the screen. A similar setup is used for lab animals that peck a key, bird, or poke their nose in a hole, rodent, when they see a light flash. If humans or animals are distracted or their attention lapses, even briefly, they may miss the light and the opportunity to respond. Humans, and many animal species, exhibit wide variability in sustained attention. See Box 2.3. Box 2.3, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, ADHD. For most people, selective and sustained attention are automatic processes that appear to require very little mental energy. For others, focusing on one thing at a time and sustaining this focus beyond a few minutes is almost impossible. These difficulties often lead to a diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, which affects up to 12.3% of boys and 5% of girls in the USA. Pritchard et al., 2012. Children with ADHD often perform poorly in school, even if they score at age level on standardized intelligence tests. The inability to focus on one source of information means that they often miss or misinterpret instructions, and they have difficulty completing assigned tasks because they are easily distracted. The hyperactivity that accompanies these deficits makes classroom management of ADHD children particularly challenging. The frequency of ADHD has increased dramatically in North America over the last 30 years, raising concerns that the disorder is simply overdiagnosed in a society that does not allow boys to be boys. Other critics argue that young people today have difficulty focusing on one thing at a time because they are constantly surrounded by sensory stimulation from computer games, text messages, and electronic gadgets. One of the more intriguing hypotheses of ADHD etiology is that symptoms emerge when children have reduced opportunities to engage in rough and tumble play. In rat pups, play fighting is necessary for normal development of the frontal cortex. Conversely, frontal lobe lesions in rats produce ADHD-like symptoms. Importantly, these deficits are alleviated if the brain-damaged pups are allowed to engage in vigorous play fighting with other young rats. Panksepp's ideas are not as far-fetched as they sound. Compared to neurotypical controls of the same age, individuals with ADHD have smaller frontal lobes and reduced cortical thickness in the right frontal lobe that correlates with the severity of their illness. The most common treatment for ADHD in North America is prescription medication. Methylphenidate, better known by its trade name Ritalin, increases activity of the neurotransmitter dopamine, which then improves both selective and sustained attention. Swanson et al., 2011. The downside to methylphenidate is that the drug is a stimulant, similar in structure and activity to amphetamine. Many people are concerned that long-term Ritalin treatment will produce additional problems, particularly in children. Clinicians and parents in favor of the drug point out that reduced misconduct and increased academic and social acceptance outweigh the potential risks of chronic drug use. Even without any treatment, symptoms often decline across childhood, although some people believe that affected adults who show minimal deficits have simply learned to cope with their disorder. The natural environment equivalent of sustained attention is continuously watching for predators or prey. Predators, as well as aggressive conspecifics, have a much higher chance of success if they can mount a surprise attack, so the ability to remain vigilant across time has a huge survival advantage. Of course, an individual animal that spends all of its time watching for attacks will have no opportunity to forage or hunt for itself, let alone reproduce or care for its young. Many species have solved this problem by living in social groups. Under these conditions, the task of keeping watch for approaching danger can be spread across the group. Think about our human ancestors taking turns on the night watch. Groups of animals employ the same tactic by having each member remain alert for short, alternating periods. You can observe this in a flock of birds that each scan the environment between periods of searching for food. As soon as one member detects danger, they alert the other birds by emitting alarm calls and quickly escaping. Figure 2.20 shows the outcome of this process in a flock of coots all taking flight when a predator, in this case a bald eagle, Haliaetus leucocephalus, is detected flying overhead. As with any cooperative endeavor, the work for each individual goes down as the number in the group go up. Thus, the amount of time that birds spend scanning the environment decreases as the size of the flock increases. Bertram, 1980. This likely explains why guppies live in bigger schools as the risk of predation increases. and why hawks are less successful in killing pigeons that live in large flocks. Figure 2.20. Flock of coots taking flight when a predator is detected. Also, they're all gonna fly up off the water because of an eagle. They're cute. Divided attention. Both selective and sustained attention allow organisms to focus on a limited part of their sensory world. Divided attention is the opposite. It describes the ability to process simultaneously sensory input from more than one source. Divided attention allows humans to do more than one thing at a time, although in most cases, one or both tasks suffer. Even relatively simple tasks, like reciting a nursery rhyme or calculating arithmetic sums, are disrupted when subjects must listen to a spoken message at the same time. Media multitasking is no different. In fact, individuals with more experience sharing their time between cell phones, texting, web surfing, and other activities perform worse on a series of cognitive tests. Contrary to popular belief, multitasking is not the most efficient way to get things done. Laboratory tests reveal that limits on divided attention are not restricted to humans. Using an experimental setup, much like the one shown in Figure 2.19, Dukas and Camille, 2000, showed that blue jays are better at detecting prey when they can focus on one target as opposed to dividing their attention between two targets. Moreover, targets that are cryptic or difficult to detect require more attention, making it less likely that the bird will notice an approaching predator. This phenomenon can be observed in the natural environment. Guppies that are feeding take longer to escape from an approaching cichlid than resting guppies, suggesting that the prey fish are less likely to notice a predator if they are paying attention to securing their own meal. Some animals, unlike many humans, appear to recognize their own limitations on attention because they modify their behavior when evaluating the trade-off between feeding and predator detection. For example, stickleback fish prefer to feed on high-density swarms of water fleas because these yield food at a high rate. But catching prey under these conditions demands more attention, so the fish switch to low-density swarms if a predator threatens. The fact that humans and animals have difficulty paying attention to more than one thing at a time illustrates an important principle of attention. It is limited. Limited attention means that the brain can only process a certain amount of information at any given time. Input that requires more attention uses more of this limited cognitive capacity, restricting other incoming information. One of the easiest ways to test this is to listen to a radio documentary while performing mental arithmetic. If the arithmetic is simple, information from the news report can be processed at the same time. As the difficulty increases, the ability to understand and remember the auditory information declines. This may simply reflect neural constraints on cognitive processing, which evolution has dealt with by allowing some processes to become automatic. For example, a sudden loud noise causes an orienting response in mammals that directs attention to a particular stimulus or location. This response, that occurs without awareness, focuses attention on potentially meaningful information, e.g., something that signals danger, but places minimal demands on cognition. The load on cognitive processes is reduced further if a behavior is repeated frequently enough to become automatic. Many highly accomplished musicians or athletes perform their skilled movements with little or no conscious awareness. This leaves enough attentional resources for other activities and helps to explain why some people really do seem capable of doing more than one thing at a time. In most cases, they are engaged in an over-rehearsed activity that requires minimal attention, leaving ample cognitive resources for other activities. Chapter Summary. There is an enormous range of sensory abilities across the animal kingdom, which often matches the ecological niche of a species. This suggests that evolutionary pressures have helped to shape sensory system function in different animals. The sensory drive hypothesis provides a specific explanation for the evolution of sensory systems by stating that natural selection favors adaptations that maximize the effectiveness of communication, both within and between species. Evolutionary adaptations can also explain the apparent paradoxes of sensory bias, sensory exploitation, and supernormal stimuli. Evolution provides the blueprint for sensory systems, but the development and fine-tuning of many sensory abilities depend on sensory experience during postnatal life. Hubble and Weisel's work highlighted the importance of visual input in early life for normal visual development, with later work revealing the same phenomenon in other sensory systems. The specific timing of these sensitive periods varies across species and across sensory systems. Interestingly, a loss or deficit in one sense early in life may lead to a heightened capacity in another. This compensatory plasticity could allow animals to adapt within their lifetime to new sensory environments. Sensory system function can be divided into two stages: detection and processing. Sensory detection begins when physical signals, e.g. light or sound waves, activate the organs. This information is then segregated, organized, and transmitted to other brain areas for further processing. Despite the enormous variation in the type of sensory information that different organisms can detect, general principles of sensory system function are preserved across species. For example, stimulus properties such as intensity or duration are coded by the firing patterns of neurons in many different animals. Sensory information that is transmitted to higher brain regions is recombined into perceptions that allow organisms to make sense of the world around them. Psychophysics describes this relationship between the physical properties of stimuli, sensations, and how these are interpreted, perception. Elemental theories of perception focus on explaining how individual units of sensory input are combined, whereas ecological theories emphasize an organism's interaction with the environment as a determinant of perceptual experience, like optic flow. For both groups of theories, perception is an active process that involves filtering and extracting meaningful information from the environment. Perception is constrained further by attention, which allows an organism to focus on specific stimuli or events in the environment. Selective attention, the ability to attend to a limited range of sensory information, is aided by mental search images. Sustained attention, the ability to maintain focus on one aspect of the environment for an extended period, allows animals to remain vigilant in watching for prey or predators. Selective and sustained attention work in opposition to divided attention, the ability to process input from more than one source at the same time. Although many people do not believe it, almost all cognitive processes are compromised when attention is divided between too many sources.